decade or so ago, these were among the baddest cars on the road, and not much has changed since then. The Mercedes SLS AMG Black Series and Porsche 911 GT2 RS are still two of the meanest performance cars ever built, but is one meaner than the other?
SLS Black Series. Oh man, I love this car. I adore this thing. I love the way it looks, the way it sounds, the way it goes, the way it handles. Oh. But I want to start by talking about the engine. This is the best version of one of the finest combustion engines there's ever been. Honestly, this 6.2 litre AMG V8, it's one of the best. But then you give it 620 something horsepower, you give it an 8,000 RPM redline, and you have a masterpiece. This thing is absolutely sensational.
AMG's naturally aspirated 6.2 litre V8 is already one of the all-time greats, but here it's better than ever. In the Black Series it produces 622 brake horsepower and spins out to 8,000 RPM thanks to a completely revised valve train with modified camshafts. It sits behind the front axle line, giving the car a front mid-engine layout for better balance.
Oh, it sounds like thunder, and it makes this car go like the clappers. So it displaces 6.2 litres. That means it's got massive torque. So you get this really urgent rush from it when you put your foot down. It feels so strong, so fast, but then it spins out to 8,000 RPM and it keeps going. It spins really hard to the red line. What do they say? There's no replacement for displacement? Yes, there is. Displacement and an 8,000 RPM redline, it's the best. And this DCT gearbox, it's good, it's snappy, it's quick. Not the quickest, it's getting on a bit now, it's a bit old, but it's plenty snappy enough, plenty responsive enough to get the most out of that engine.
The SLS Black Series hit the road in 2013. Compared to the standard SLS, it got a prominent aero package, a completely overhauled chassis with wider tracks front and rear, a 70 kilogram weight saving and track day tyres. It cost close to £250,000 when new. Now you'll pay at least double that, probably more.
So is this just a track car? Not at all. Not at all. It's fantastic on this road. It's so good to drive on the road. You look at it and you think it's going to have no ride quality whatsoever. And it is firm. The suspension is quite tough. But there's enough magic in the damping to deal with a bumpy road, to deal with lumps and cambers, which means you really can enjoy it on the road. It's not just a track car at all. On a very bumpy road, it does run out of ideas, and you can feel when you land hard into a compression that the rear axle is close to running out of suspension travel. You can feel it bottoming out. And if you landed into a compression too hard, I think the thing would skip. You can feel that happening. But that's only on a very bumpy road and in very big compressions. The rest of the time, the suspension works really well. And the steering is pin sharp. And the front axle is super responsive with massive grip. We've got Cup 2 tyres and thankfully a dry, warm road. And the way this thing gets into a corner is just outrageous. It just snaps into a direction change. Oh, it's fantastic. You can carry so much speed. There's barely any body roll in corners. Body control is absolutely fantastic. Really strong brakes. I like the brake pedal feel as well. This is phenomenal, this thing. So yes, it remains my favourite Mercedes AMG. It might be my favourite AMG, but sadly I'm not about to spend more than £500,000 on one. I think I need a few more YouTube subs first. But imagine you did one day strike it lucky and you did want to buy an SLS AMG Black Series. You'd want to know absolutely everything about that car's history. Well, now with Carly, you can do comprehensive vehicle history checks absolutely free. Those things cost 30 quid elsewhere.
I ran the SLS Black Series through Carly's car history checker and it showed a clean history. No outstanding finance, no major damage, no mileage discrepancies, and it showed the car had never been stolen, plus its full MOT history.
You don't need to be spending thousands of pounds on a car to want to know all about that car's history. Let's say you're buying an affordable family car, a Skoda Yeti. I like a Skoda Yeti. You found one that seems to be a good bet, but because you're smart, you do a free vehicle history check on Carly and look at what you find.
Oh dear, the Yeti you are about to buy has been written off with structural damage. Carly shows you all the details with photos. Imagine buying that car, putting your family in it, and only later finding out it was written off. Car history checks on Carly are really quick and super simple to do. Just click the link on screen or in the description, or just head to mycarly.com/vehicle history and enter the car's registration number. It could not be easier. And you don't even have to be in the market to use Carly's history checker. Why not see if your current car is hiding any secrets right now? The SLS Black Series and GT2 RS are more different than they are alike, but they share one crucial thing: a philosophy. Both are the toughest, fastest and most extreme versions of the cars they're based on, designed to give you the biggest thrill possible. But which one does it best?
If you're looking for a thrill, look no further than the 997 GT2 RS. Oh, this thing is an exciting car. Actually, it's quite a scary car as well. And if you want a sense of occasion and you've got £300,000, this is the car for you.
The GT2 RS was among the last of the 997 series 911s. When it landed in 2010, it was the first 911 with more than 600 brake horsepower, 611 to be exact. It paired a twin-turbo flat six with an upgraded version of the 911 GT3 RS chassis. The GT2 RS cost £164,000 new. Today, they're more like 300.
Let's talk about the engine then. 3.6 litre flat six, twin turbo, loads of power and torque. Does it feel as fast as I was expecting? Foot down, second gear. I think maybe I was expecting a little bit more. I think I was expecting to have my face ripped off by this car. And actually, when you get to the red line in second gear and then into third and to the red line in third gear, then you start to feel how violently accelerative this car is. But otherwise, I think a Turbo S of the same era probably feels more accelerative, perhaps because it's got four-wheel drive and it puts the power down. Also, unusually for a turbo engine, it's got top end. If you want to feel the full force of the acceleration, you have to run it all the way out to the red line at around 7,000 RPM. That's where it feels quickest. It's not one of those turbo engines that's done by 6,000, but that does mean it's not the most responsive turbo engine you'll come across. Sometimes you do put your foot down, and if you don't already have 3,000-4,000 RPM dialed up, you're waiting a split second for the acceleration to come. But when it does, whew, the soundtrack is quite muted. You get that with turbos, don't you really? So it doesn't sound fantastic. Gear shift, it's quite a heavy, bulky, sort of notchy shift. It's not a typical slick, lovely, fluid Porsche gear shift at all. There's probably a good reason for that. But you've got that classic Porsche thing of all the control weights being perfectly matched together. It means it's lovely to drive this thing. And actually, the ride comfort is fantastic, which in turn means that it deals with a bumpy road. It breathes with the road. It rides even better than the SLS Black Series. The ride is phenomenal. But then the GT3 RS of the same era rides beautifully as well. We've got gorgeous steering in this car, so natural, so direct, so easy to read, huge grip. Enormous traction as well. On a dry day, on a dry, warm road, you can just use all the power from second gear and it goes. I'm sure on a colder day or in the wet, this car will have an edge to it, no question. But today, it's just wonderful. It's got that lovely 911 thing of feeling light at the front end, which gives you something to think about. You have to work to get the front end tucked into a corner, and then you stand on the power super early and use that 911 traction. It's so nice to be back in a 997 again. It feels compact, it feels light. How simple the interior is, how good the visibility is. These are fantastic cars, whether we're talking Carrera or GT2 RS. Choosing a favourite between these two phenomenal cars, that is not going to be straightforward at all. Two cars with massive character, two cars with enormous power that handle beautifully, two cars with real edge. They're intimidating. In some ways, they're violent. But my God, they are both phenomenal to drive. You want to be a better driver. I know this because everybody who loves cars wants to become a better driver. And I'm going to help you do just that. This is Steve Sutcliffe. He's maybe the best driver that car journalism has ever produced. He once lapped Jenson Button's Formula One car around Silverstone within half a second of the official test driver. He's that good. Steve has written the definitive guide to becoming a more skillful, safer, faster driver for the intercooler, and I'm going to share it with you completely free. All you need to do is click the link and enter your name and email. Over 3 weeks, I'll share Steve's comprehensive guide to driving like a pro straight into your email inbox. So click the link, fill out the form, and you'll be on your way to becoming a better driver. I've been thinking long and hard about these two cars today.
Yeah.
And actually I've been thinking about what it is that people like us want from very special performance cars.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately it's a sort of sense of occasion and an experience.
Yes.
And in both regards, these two are...
They excel.
They're up there, aren't they?
But for utterly different reasons.
Yes.
The best thing about this is that we're doing it at all, because this was your idea.
Yeah.
I didn't think of making this happen. But it's such an interesting comparison.
Yeah.
Because their strengths and weaknesses are so different to each other's. It's not like, you know, they both got amazing powertrains, but the handling, it's almost as if where one's strong, the other's not so strong. And you get them together. And this, the SLS Black Series, it's such a rare and special thing.
Yeah, it's so
The
rare.
other thing, okay, this was the ultimate SLS.
Yeah.
It was so much better than any other SLS.
Oh, you've said this. You don't much like the standard car, do you?
I never quite trusted the standard car. I always found them a bit tricky, a bit difficult to drive. And this is much, much faster and more entertaining. But more than anything else, I just feel much more at home in it.
Yeah.
I find it much more reassuring. It doesn't scare me. Whereas that, the GT2 RS, and it is true because anybody who's listened to our podcast will know that back in 2010, trying to do a ridiculous cornering shot, I did have a minor interaction with the scenery on a private airfield somewhere. Not seriously or anything, but it bit in a way that no other modern 911 I've ever driven has bitten. And it's just sort of so. In my head, I'm thinking this is not just because it's the fastest or the most expensive, but this is the absolute peak development of the SLS. And the question to me was, is that the best 997?
It's a very interesting
Just because it's the fastest
question.
and the most
And
expensive.
I was pondering it myself driving it, and I did come to the conclusion that I'd sooner have a GT3 RS.
Yeah, me too.
But this is the SLS you want.
So this is the best SLS, that is not the best 997.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, does that mean the GT2 RS is better than the SLS Black?
Oh dear. It's so difficult.
It is.
It's so difficult.
But okay, let's maybe come back to that in a moment. Let's talk about some of the strengths of this car.
Yeah.
You have to talk about the engine,
Yes.
because I think it's probably the finest version of one of the greatest naturally aspirated V8s there's ever been.
For people who love driving
Yeah.
and love naturally aspirated engines, I think it's the greatest Mercedes engine of the modern era. This particular specification, with a 622 horsepower, so 100 horsepower per litre from that unbelievable AMG bespoke engine. Didn't go into anything else, just AMG product. Still using it and racing today, even though it is absolutely old as the hills.
Yeah.
It kind of, I mean, yes, they're obviously the gull-wing doors and the way that it looks and everything else, but in terms of the driving experience, it kind of defines the car, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
But it also, it's so appropriate to this car because it's got this massive nose in it. It kind of makes a statement, and you just really, really hope that whatever's under there delivers on that.
Yeah.
My goodness.
It really does.
It really does.
There are some Black Series that are dripping with character and they have the engine and the rest of it, but not the chassis to back it all up.
It's got that too.
This does have the chassis. It really does.
It does.
Some of these roads are pretty tricky, and it is good along them.
You're always aware when you're sitting in it, and another reason it is so different to the 911. I mean, obviously one's got the engine in the front, the other's got the engine in the back, but you are aware of sitting there, aren't you? And this massive, great prow with like a boat out in front of you, and you're sort of, whereas in the 911, it's a complete, you're on the nose of the car all the time, so you've got to kind of tune into it. But actually, when you really push this thing, you look at the two and you think, oh, that's got to be half a ton heavier than the 911. But it's not. It's only about 180 kilos.
Yeah, not quite 200, which you'd think it'd be way more.
You think it'd be way more. Now, it does feel heavier, but it's still a great, and it's not as nimble, and the feel isn't as good. To me, it's not as pure a driver's car as the 911. But am I actually having less fun in it? I'm not sure, because I'm enjoying this for a completely different set of reasons. I'm enjoying the occasion in this, and I'm enjoying the drive in that.
Twin turbo, 611 horsepower.
Yeah.
The first 600 plus horsepower road going 911.
Yeah.
Does it feel as fast as you expected?
Yes.
It does?
Yes, it absolutely does. Did you not think so?
Not quite.
You've been driving too many hypercars.
I think, if only that was true. I think when you row one gear after another and you let the engine rip and rip and rip, then you are clipping along, you're going fast, and it feels really quick then.
That's interesting.
But it doesn't give that whack in the back.
See, I felt that in the SLS. The first time I put a foot down in that, I thought, oh, this is a fast car. But I wasn't going, whoa, because you and I, we've been very lucky. We've been knocking about in, modern McLarens and Ferraris and that sort of thing, which just chuck you at the horizon. This doesn't do that. And I felt that had a bit of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And also, I guess because I'm frankly just a little bit scared of it, I don't want that to have any more power, particularly if it meant more lag.
It doesn't need it.
Less throttle response. Doesn't need it at all.
So I think we both said that we would choose a GT3 RS of the same era.
4 litre.
You'd have a 4 litre?
Yeah.
No, I'd go 3.8.
Would you?
Yes, I would. Just a little bit more supple.
Okay. Different conversation. We need to move on.
But we're agreed that it's probably because that's got more power and performance than a GT3 RS, but it doesn't have the engine character of the naturally aspirated cars, doesn't have the soundtrack.
It's got quite a lot of lag.
Yeah.
And it feels to me, it hasn't got too much power for the chassis, but I think that chassis is kind of where they could get to without powertrain in it, and you wouldn't want to go much further. Where there's something like a GT3 RS, it just feels, GT3 RS doesn't feel under chassised or overpowered, it just feels
balanced.
Right, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas this is very much a powertrain type of experience. And it is an absolute sledgehammer of a motor, but I'd just rather have the throttle response and the noise and the 8,800 revs and all the other stuff that GT3 RS does.
I don't know when you last drove a 997, but how lovely is it to be in a 997 again?
That's great.
Because they're small, they feel light.
Yeah.
The interior is so stark and simple.
So bare, isn't it?
So bare.
Yeah.
It's just a lovely place to be, and I mean, it's clearly the daddy of 997s as far as power and performance goes. But also, they all feel lovely.
But what this has, which the SLS doesn't have, and what, regardless of whatever's in the back of it, the feel of the car, the body control of the car, that sense of involving you in the occasion, really making you, for want of a less terrible cliche, part of the machine.
Yeah.
Because I guess it's a Porsche, because there's very little weight on the nose, and because it is, I think, a more extreme car. I think this is more of sort of road car with trackability, whereas that's really a track car with roadability. It is a more involving experience. I think as a pure driver, it's not to say I necessarily prefer it. I may have to make you read the story to find out which one I actually prefer, because I'm not entirely sure myself yet. But as a pure driver, that is a purer, more rewarding driving experience.
It is. Yeah, it is. And I totally agree with that. It is more of a driver's car. But the SLS Black still has something. It's so exciting, and it's got that engine. So choosing a favourite out of the two of them is really difficult.
One other thing.
Go on.
3 pedals, 2 pedals.
Well,
does that make a difference to you?
It does.
It makes a difference to me.
It's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably one reason why I would have the Porsche. You're not going to tell us your preference, because you need to give it some thought.
You need to go and read my story, which will be on the website and app now.
Well, there you go. He's done the plug for that. So I'll do the plug For the YouTube channel, please remember to give this video a thumbs up, comment below, let us know which of these two cars you think you would have, and subscribe to our channel. Now, he's mentioned the written story, which is going to be live on the Intercooler app and website now. Here's a link right there, look, and you can go and sign up in seconds using Google Pay or Apple Pay and start a 30-day free trial to get around the paywall, to read his story and find out which of these two cars he prefers.